All right. Next up is banning TikTok unconstitutional. So the Congress is considering two bills. One is called the Data Act. That would enable the president to sanction foreign entities dealing in software that is subject to the jurisdiction of or influence of China, and that may be facilitating bad stuff by China. Bad stuff is, I think, the technical statutory term. Another bill is known as the Restrict Act. It would grant the Secretary of Commerce new authority to basically mitigate national security risk related to communications technology that a foreign adversary has interest in, China listed among those. And David, the ACLU has come out and said clear violation of the First Amendment. Curious what you thought.
So I think first, it's not crazy to say that this is a violation of the First Amendment. If in fact,
no, it certainly implicates the
absolutely.
First Amendment. That I think is unquestionable. The larger question is really going to be, does it pass strict scrutiny anyway?
Well, I think let's look at it this way, Sarah. Let's put things into separate buckets. Okay.
Okay. I love
we love our buckets. Here's bucket one. Bucket one is we're going to ban TikTok because we don't like TikTok's content. In that circumstance, I think you're losing that case. There is a case called Lamont versus Postmaster General. So this is a Cold War era case that is from 1965 that is that essentially says that you can even receive, it invalidated a federal law that barred Americans from receiving communist political propaganda from foreign countries unless they specifically asked the Postal Service to deliver it. The court held that the law was an impermissible attempt to control the flow of ideas to the public. And I'm inspired by this statement by an opinion, a guest opinion piece in the Times called "There's a Problem with Banning TikTok." It's called the First Amendment, and we can put this in the show notes. And it's by Jamil Jaffer, who's executive director of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia. And essentially what he's saying is, look, TikTok as a Chinese company does not have First Amendment rights, but the American users of TikTok have First Amendment rights. And it's the American users of TikTok that are going to have those First Amendment rights violated. Now, so here is the interesting question is, if it's bucket one, where essentially Congress is saying, we don't want the Chinese in charge of the messaging at TikTok. And so therefore we're going to ban it and deprive the 150 million American users of their own content that many of them are putting onto TikTok. Then I think you've got a real First Amendment issue, very important First Amendment issue. But here's bucket number two. Bucket number two is, what if you're not banning TikTok because of anything on TikTok at all, but you're telling TikTok, well, you need to divest from Chinese ownership because Chinese law allows Chinese authorities, Communist Party authorities, to get all of the information about Americans that TikTok vacuums up. In other words, so TikTok, like social media companies everywhere, vacuums up a ton of information about its users, and it's that information about its users that it monetizes through ads, etc., to make it a profitable business. So what if the ban has nothing to do with anything related to the content on TikTok, but has a lot to do with the legal arrangement that says private American user information is at the disposal of the Chinese Communist Party? I think there, Sarah, you could essentially place a condition on TikTok's current operation that is related to building an absolute firewall against sending American information to China. And that would probably pass constitutional muster. But something that's just a flat ban and that is motivated by the content on TikTok, I think that fails under a First Amendment. That would fail under a First Amendment analysis. But I'm super interested.
Let me give you a number. I want to give you a third bucket that is sort of not at issue here, but nevertheless interesting to me, which is it's not about the specific content on TikTok, and don't love the Chinese aspect, but put that aside for a second. We have research showing that TikTok in particular is more addictive than other social media platforms and is causing specifically more mental health problems and anxiety among young people. Now, some of that actually exists in our literature, some of it doesn't. I don't think there's anything saying TikTok
Right.
is worse.
Yeah.
But again, bear
There's a
with
lot
me
on
in this hypothetical.
Instagram, or there's some stuff on Instagram. Yeah.
Exactly. But imagine that there's a little bit of research saying TikTok is worse. And so they moved to ban TikTok, not because of the content, but because of the medium.
Yeah. Now, I think that would violate the First Amendment. However, with a caveat, if you move to limit TikTok's access by age, I think you've got a stronger argument than if you're saying, I'm just going to ban TikTok entirely because the information flow is too much for children and adults to handle. I think, I think you're going to have a big issue.
But what's interesting, I should have actually put in the age restriction because that's what I meant is, you have to be above the age of 18, let's say, to use TikTok because it's particularly addictive to young minds. Think of this like cigarettes or alcohol. Right. The problem from a First Amendment standpoint, because remember, cigarettes and alcohol don't have a First Amendment problem.
Exactly.
Is that young people do have First Amendment rights. Yeah. And so interestingly to me, bucket 2, the national security bucket, and bucket 3, the First Amendment rights of people under the age of 16, let's say, I think with both on the First Amendment analysis, you end up in strict scrutiny land. And in your bucket 1, you do too. It's just that it fails really quickly. So bucket 1, you're in strict scrutiny, fatal in fact, you're donesies. And remember, with strict scrutiny, we're looking for both a compelling government interest and least restrictive means. I think with your bucket 2 on the national security issue, clearly a compelling government interest. And I want to spell out the hypothetical a little bit more, which is it's not just that TikTok is gathering data on Americans, because American companies are also gathering data on Americans. It's the ability to use that in then the information algorithmic sharing to Americans. So let me just use a very apocalyptic example. In the run up to the 2024 election, China, the CCP tells TikTok to find the 10,000 users who are most interested in extreme political videos, like conspiracy theory political videos, and violent videos. Target those people with the following information. And it's something really bad, right? Like, Joe Biden is trying to become part of the Illuminati. It will be the last US election, whatever conspiracy theory stuff you want for the purpose of sowing chaos in American elections. That's what the data, capabilities are. And that's what it can be used for. So I think the compelling government interest test is very easily met in bucket number 2. I think the least restrictive means is as well, because I don't know how else you would, your conditions, I think, are smart, David. But I think you could honestly just say if the CCP, if you're not divested from a Chinese, state actor regime, then like we're done here. There's no other means that could work. That is the least restrictive. In bucket number 2 on the age restriction issue, compelling government interest, I think is met. And I think that's where we're going to have some diverging roads there, is that it's not that compelling. Young people use social media all the time. And it's not like alcohol and drugs where they, the argument at least would be like, alcohol causes drunk driving or kids to have alcohol poisoning. I would say that you could point to suicide rates, for instance, on the compelling government interest. And then for the least restrictive means, the problem with that is enforcement more than it is the least restrictive means. How do you enforce a 16-year-old age limit without creating greater problems? I am sympathetic to that. I get the sort of practical part of it. I just don't think it's a First Amendment problem, and I don't think it fits into the least restrictive means test, that it's hard to do. For instance, One way to do it is to ask people their ages before they get on TikTok, but they could lie.
Right.
Yada, yada. We go from there. I actually think that on buckets 2 and 3, you could probably ban TikTok under the right circumstances. Ban meaning have restrictions that the CCP has to be fully divested in bucket 2, or an age restriction in bucket 3.
Yeah, I think bucket 3, if you look at the First Amendment rights of young people, we already have a lot of legal restrictions on their ability to receive information at a younger age. I mean, heck, broadcast television right now, it's government-owned airwaves where ABC, NBC, CBS have, used the government-owned airwaves, and they have limits on the content that's available when children are watching. They have limits on the content that's available even when children are not likely to watch. There's a reason why HBO has a kind of content that NBC, CBS, ABC do not have. And one of the reasons is that there are decency restrictions on broadcast media that don't apply to cable media that are directly related to, and in many ways directly inspired by the universal access that kids had to broadcast media. Now, they have the same access now to HBO that they had to broadcast media, but there is a different order of a different level of state control over what children have access to and can see than adults. Back when the Communications Decency Act was passed, it had restrictions on adult content online in the absence of controls such as age verification. And that was struck down by the Supreme Court, not because kids had a right to receive adult content, they don't, but because the internet, the technological infrastructure of the internet was such that you couldn't restrict children without also instituting a regime that excessively restricted adults. And that would be, in my mind, if you look at the Reno case, this is the ACLU Reno case that struck down the age restrictions on the Communications Decency Act. If you look at that, it's pretty clear that ruling was related to the technology of the time. If you have a way to effectively screen out kids from content kids don't have a right to see, and while preserving access from adults, I think that you've got some real potential there for regulation. The question is going to be, is there justification to say this is content kids should not see? That's going to be the real question.
Fun talk.
Yeah.
All right. So, yes, there's First Amendment problems, and no, they're not unovercomable.
Right. Exactly.
Write your laws carefully, and I think you can do it.
Yep. Draft laws with extreme competence, which, legislators do that all the time.
All the time. I'm very, very, I feel confident in their competence.